First of all, that document that was released by Al-Azhar institution on June the 20th, it was a culmination of months of meetings and discussions with different groups among, with Al-Azhar, along with other different sectors of the Egyptian society, whether religious figures, intellectuals. Would you tell us more about such meetings?
Yeah, Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Actually, Al-Azhar started to gain its leading role in the Arab and the Muslim world, especially after the 25th January revolution, enjoining, like all other Egyptian institutions, the atmosphere of unprecedented freedom, you can say. And based on this, and viewing that Al-Azhar is a leading religious institution in Egypt, it started to gather all the different religious factions under its own all-embracing umbrella. Over the last 2 to 3 months, actually, Al-Azhar started to invite some dominant religious figures who are outside the official institution of Al-Azhar. Still, they are gaining popularity in the Egyptian street, or they are dominating the religious scene in one way or another, using different satellite
even though they
channels.
have totally different views.
Some of them have totally different views. Al-Azhar started inviting figures like the head of the Muslim Brotherhood, for example, and some of the Irshad office. Also, Al-Azhar started influential Muslim scholars as popular as Muhammad Hassan, for example, people like the celebrity Amr Khalid, for example, and even some Muslim scholars or dua who were just living in exile outside Egypt, like Omar Abdel Kafi, for example. And there was an intensive discussion. I came to know after consulting with the Sheikhdom over the last few days that there were intensive discussions with these figures about the future of Egypt. So there was some kind of closed sessions, exchange of information, of views.
Was there any debates on certain matters, or there was consensus on the different points of the document, the 11 points?
Actually, it took an informal kind of discussion. You know, some people like the celebrities, I told you about the religious celebrities, if I understand the word very well. It was the first time ever to enter the Sheikhdom and to have, you know, some kind of nice discussions with the religious leaders of Egypt at Al-Azhar University or at Al-Azhar Sheikhdom. So it didn't take the formal kind of thing, because it was not an official kind of visit. Rather, it was a brotherly meeting between the Grand Imam and some Muslim scholars in order to bring, because this is part of the vision of the Sheikhdom nowadays, to bring all Muslim scholars inside Egypt, at least, in order to have a unified vision about the future of this country. Also, Al-Azhar itself is planning for an international unified vision about Sunni Islam, as far as
So it won't be
I know.
the last document as well?
Yeah. As far as I know, they are preparing nowadays for an international conference about the future of Sunni Islam, as well as the future of Egypt. And it started with the local level, and then it will go to a different direction, to invite some other international callers from the Arab and the Muslim world, from Africa, from North America, from Europe. Yeah.
But still, it's an unbinding document, but it's widely seen here in Egypt as a cornerstone, especially in the arguments about the new constitution that Egypt is looking forward to. So do you think this is a sign that Al-Azhar has started regaining its historic role?
Yeah, let me just comment on the non-binding. All what a religious man or a religious figure, be he Muslim or Christian, says, for Muslims, for example, we call it a fatwa or a legal ruling or a religious edict. So it's non-binding by its nature. So I advise you to do this. You can do it, you can't. But I have to tell you, it's part of my religious responsibility as a religious person to tell you that this is lawful, this is unlawful, this is advisable, this is recommended. So it is non-binding, but still it's very important, it's very critical, and it is very good that Al-Azhar is doing it at the very last. Enjoying the atmosphere of freedom, as I told you, and it is very good to continue in this direction, and more importantly is to have some kind of critical analysis to our own approach as a religious institution, and to think of a better tomorrow to our own religious establishments, whether Muslim, Christian, Judaic establishments. It's very important that the religious personnel start to rethink their approach to their own surroundings, and to feel really that they are part and parcel of the society they are living. And this is part of what Al-Azhar is actually doing or started recently to do.
And the debate and the reaction it had created, do you think this already signifies that there is a shift in the people's views of Al-Azhar, and that it has started regaining its previous role?
Al-Azhar has been in Egypt from time immemorial. You can say that Al-Azhar is a very old religious institution that is practicing its role fully in Egypt. It has been 1,050 years since Al-Azhar started in Egypt during the Fatimid period. Al-Azhar is a very huge institution, actually, representing Sunni, or supposedly representing Sunni Muslims. Actually, it has more than 16,000 international students coming to study from 105 nationalities, coming to study at Al-Azhar University. This actually reflects the significance of Al-Azhar and its leading role in the Arab, the African, and the whole world. Actually, Al-Azhar University, it has more than 170 faculties. You can say we have School of Medicine, School of Engineering, School of Faculty, the Faculty of Languages and Translation, School of Islamic Studies, a School of Theology, School of Arabic Studies. So you can have different sorts of scholarship at Al-Azhar University, and we have different nationalities coming to study in the classical as well as the modern colleges. So we are talking about a very
the most important institution in Sunni Islam. But how do you see the changing discourse of Al-Azhar, especially that it's still a government institution so far, and now it's calling for fighting corruption and calling for social justice, and we've seen a change in discourse in this last document. What is your take on that?
And the document talked very clearly about the importance of Al-Azhar gaining its own independence and regaining its own independence from the ruling authority, as well as regaining its own endowments. So Al-Azhar has its own endowments that were taken over by some members of the previous regime. You can say Al-Azhar is a very rich institution if we keep in mind its own endowments. This is a very important thing, and this is what Al-Azhar is trying to do, to regain its endowments in order to be able to fund its own religious projects, to fund its own students, and to help international students coming from other nationalities, and to spend very generously on them, because they are the ambassadors of moderate Islam. They are the callers of true Islam propagated by Al-Azhar in Egypt. So Al-Azhar is not just a national or a local government attached institution in Egypt. It's a leading institution, and it always brings the wow factor You know, you are a graduate of abroad. You can say, you can feel it. Are you a graduate of Al-Azhar? Yes. Yeah, wow, you know how religious, how you know how scholarship you have gained. It's a very old Muslim university. It is the oldest Islamic university in the whole world, and but for some reason or another, in the previous 30, 40 years, since
Since the
earlier
1950s.
actually since the earlier reformation of Al-Azhar in 1964, it's declining for one reason or another, and it's high time now, after the revolution and after the freedom we have gained ourselves, that Al-Azhar, which is part and parcel of the Egyptian fabric, to regain its authority over its own endowments and to have its own leading projects.
And Dr. Amin, right now we are joined over the phone by Sheikh Mohammed Shadid. He's the director of the Bureau of Islam Discovery at Al-Azhar University. Sheikh Shadid.
Assalamu alaikum.
Alaikum assalam. And we're discussing the 11-point document that was presented by Al-Azhar on June the 20th, and the issue of Al-Azhar independence of the state as one of the main components of the new vision of Al-Azhar institution in the coming period. How applicable is that in your point of view?
In the beginning, I have to thank your guests, and I have to mention here during these days that Al-Azhar has played an important role from 10 centuries or more than this for explaining the moderation of Islam, or that Islam is a moderate religion, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned in the Quran. You kuntum khayra ummatin ukhrijat lin-nas, or the destination came to the world. Yes. And I have to thank Dr. Ahmad Tayyib for his declaration and for his document that he has published or declared in these difficult times. I have to mention here something very important, that this document supports the establishment of a modern state, not a religious state, as some brothers have mentioned. This state, based on the separation of powers, depends on equal rights, depends on respecting religions, as Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned this in the Quran. For you, your religion, and for us, our religion. Lakum dinukum waliyadin. And this is what Dr. Ahmad Tayyib has mentioned in his declaration.
And going back to the issue of Al-Azhar's independence, Sheikh Shadid, how do you see it? How applicable is it now?
I think, and I am sure that, I'm sure that this is important nowadays for making the dua, say the word of truth without any pressure from the government or from any person. This separation in this document will give the Al-Azhar an important role for spreading the religion of Islam.
And do you think...
So many brothers of many dua made many demonstrations for separation Al-Azhar from the government, and gathering the Minister of Awqaf, Fatwa House, and Al-Azhar to be one institution.
And the Grand Imam to be elected rather than being appointed?
Yes.
This is applicable right now?
Yes. We have to put this and to achieve it now or tomorrow, but we have to put this before our eyes, or to make it clear that if you want to establish a state, you have to separate or to make as a judge. Nowadays they are trying to separate the institution of judgment from the government, and the same thing for the dua. If you want to guide the people to trust, it is important to separate them from the ruler, to let them to say the word of truth without any pressure. With the wisdom of Islam and with the rules that Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has mentioned in the Quran, to give your advice fluidly.
And this has been the essence of the document. And Sheikh Mohammed Shadid, Director of the Bureau of Islam Discovery at Al-Azhar University, we thank you so much for joining us.
Actually, the document talked very nicely about many important issues.
Yes, definitely.
Part of which is that Islam is against the theocratic state, or let's say the religious state.
And the nature of the relation between religion and religious institutions and the state, that is a very significant point. And also the point that you mentioned, that it totally rejects the notion of a religious state as un-Islamic, and that has never existed in Islamic history.
Still, we in a country like Egypt, we can't separate ourselves from Islam because it is the official religion of the state. But how can we solve the dilemma that we are a majority Muslim country while we have a minority non-Muslims, or Copts, let's say, or other religious people of other faith groups?
It's the same applies. You cannot
the
separate.
document itself highlighted a very important issue, that while Islam is the official religion of the state, for number purposes, Muslims are greater in number in Egypt compared to other faith groups. Still, other non-Muslims have every right to practice their own personal and religious affairs in their own houses of worship in the way they like. They can run their own personal affairs. They can have their own personal status law. Issues related to marriage and divorce. They are free to practice according to their own dogma, and this is part of what the Quran actually has told us in Surah Al-Ma'idah. وَلْيَحْكُمْ أَهْلُ الْإِنْجِيلِ بِمَا أَنزَلَ اللَّهُ فِيهِ. Let the people who follow the Gospels judge according to what's written in the Gospels. There is a very important issue mentioned by Sheikh Shadid. He talked about the independence of Al-Azhar, which is very important, as well as the election of the Grand Imam. Actually, the document has touched upon this issue, although it didn't quite clearly state whether the elected religious figure should be there for 1 term or 2 terms or whatever, for a lifetime. It didn't, but we should keep in mind that it's just a newly released document that's open to feedback, and this is what we are actually doing. And I think this is just there in the background of the minds of the people in authority at Al-Azhar now, viewing the critical stage Egypt is passing through.
And since Al-Azhar made it clear that the notion of a religious state never existed before in Islam, why are there calls by, we cannot say that these are calls by mainstream groups or mainstream religious groups, but some groups claim that this is the answer to whatever problems might arise in a country, and that the notion of Islamic State actually existed.
Yeah, the reason actually is due to lack of understanding. They do not properly understand what Islam is all about. Islam started its own state as a pluralistic state in the full sense of the word. Look at the Prophet's state in Medina, Dawlat al-Medina, and the constitution of Medina. There was a constitution written by the Prophet, peace be upon him, in Medina, how he governed the different faith groups in Medina, which is the earlier Muslim society. It is the cradle of Islam, actually. There were Muslims, there were Jews, there were Christians, and there was a written constitution. So it was not just the state of Islam in Medina. It was a modern civil state in our own terms nowadays. It was not a theocratic or a religious state where Muslims used to force their own Islamic law or religious beliefs on others, even if they are Christians or Jews or whatever. And this is what we should learn. We should go back to our own foundational rules, to our own very nice rulings, and go and read between the lines and try to understand the wisdom in this. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala says in Surah Al-Baqarah, يُؤْتِ الْحِكْمَةَ مَنْ يَشَاءُ. So the people who call for these ideas may not have the necessary hikmah or the necessary wisdom with which they should argue. Allah told us, even when we start to argue with the people of other faiths, we should use the best of terms. وَلَا تُجَادِلُوا أَهْلَ الْكِتَابِ إِلَّا بِالَّتِي هِيَ أَحْسَنُ. Don't argue with the people of other faith save by using the best way. So
Yes.
sometimes we lack using the best way between our own selves as Muslims.
Dr. Said, one main point also was that Al-Azhar called on people to resort to Al-Azhar for the final word on any theological matter. Why do you think people keep resorting to maybe television channels with sheikhs having extremist views and not calling Al-Azhar or not asking Al-Azhar's opinions on theological matters?
At a certain stage in the last period, people started to lose credibility in Al-Azhar sheikhs due to the semi or complete attachment to the ruling authority, just going with the tide, going with the government. So this is and even there are certain terms that actually surfaced. They call them the scholars of the authority or whatever, and the agents of the police or whatever. So there was and due to these atmosphere, people started to go to a different direction. So Alhamdulillah, Al-Azhar is leading the track now towards a better religious understanding, and people have confidence, or let's say Al-Azhar itself is regaining its leading role. That has been hijacked by others. We are not blaming others. Everyone who tries to understand the religion in the best way and propagate, that's fine, that's well and good. But to call for a certain ideology and force it on others, it's very bad and unacceptable. So the people who belong to different denominations, from the Salafi, from whatever, Wahhabi, whatever, they came to the all-embracing umbrella of Al-Azhar, and it's really an umbrella that should cover, like the mom, like the mother, having different babies. This one is naughty, this one is noisy, this one is merciful, and this one, but they all belong.
It's an inclusive umbrella.
Yeah, it's an inclusive rather than exclusive, and this is what Al-Azhar is trying to do.
Dr. Said Amin, lecturer of Islamic Studies at Al-Azhar University, we thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
Thank you for watching The Daily Debate.